Dog owners, there's a reason you sleep in the smallest corner of your bed while the pooch sprawls out on the heart of the king-sized mattress. You'd do just about anything for your dog, even if it means sacrificing a bit of comfort. But what would you do for someone else's dog?
Before we begin, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos.
A Florida man confronted this very dilemma one afternoon when he was out studying for a life-defining test. That's when he noticed a world-famous dog in a bit of trouble and had to ask himself if he'd rather save the day or jeopardize his own future. It was November 8, 2018, and Miguel Camacho was hanging out at a park in West Tampa, where he was studying for a test to receive his journeyman electrician's license. He was getting ready to start a new career to provide for his family. Just minutes away from the grade-defining test, he broke from studying for a little mind-clearing R&R. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and began scrolling through his social media feeds until a particular post caught his eye. It was a video of a kitesurfing dog, and everyone was losing their minds about it. The black and white Jack Russell Terrier balanced the board and managed the kite rod like a real pro. This talented dog was owned by Dimitri Maramonides, his wife Helen Trotman, their daughter Olivia, and their 16-year-old son Cameron. The family was made up entirely of surfers who spent every weekend on the beach and on their boards. Cameron had been surfing since he was only 6 years old. Everyone who knew him could see that he was a natural and would someday make it big in the world of professional kitesurfing. In fact, young Cameron was recruited by Team USA and was set to compete in the 2020 Summer Olympics. Him and his family, Zeus included, were all at a kiteboarding competition at the North Skyway Bridge Beach a few days before when something terrible happened. After the Maramonideses looked away for a split second, they turned back around to notice their dog Zeus had been stolen. The family was desperate to get their dog back and spread the word of Zeus' abduction. Now, remember Miguel? He'd been sucked down the rabbit hole of Zeus YouTube videos and noticed that the latest featured Cameron pleading that people keep an eye out for Zeus. He'd been taken by a middle-aged white man in a grey sedan. At first, Miguel felt sympathetic to the family and the pup but didn't give the story much more thought. However, right when he was about to put his phone back in his pocket, he noticed a grey sedan pulling up, and a middle-aged white man got out of the car. It looked suspicious at first, but there are plenty of white men driving grey sedans. Still, something kept Miguel alert, and soon the strange man opened the car door and a black and white Jack Russell Terrier jumped out to do its business. Miguel quickly dialed the phone number left in the video's comments and to his relief, Cameron picked up. When Miguel quietly described the dog in the park to Cameron, he replied, "Hey man, that's my dog." Miguel then quickly called the police but they told him they could take no action without the owner present. Once Zeus had finished, the man pulled him back into the car and began to drive off. Miguel didn't have time for this. He had to make it back to school for his test. You know, the one that would determine his grade in a crucial class. Miguel, though, didn't want to let him out of his sight. He jumped into his own car and began following the sedan, aware the man ahead of him could very well be dangerous. After several miles, the man pulled over and got out of his car. "Why are you following me?" he barked at Miguel while approaching him aggressively. "I don't think that's your dog," Miguel calmly responded. "Of course, it is," the man yelled. So Miguel called out, "Zeus." Excited to hear his name, the dog jumped out of the car and ran towards Miguel, who quickly scooped him up and beat a hasty retreat from his abductor. After saving the dog, Miguel returned him to his family. "We are still pinching ourselves to see if we are dreaming," said Helen Trotman, wife of Dimitri Maramonides. "We are so fortunate Miguel was there and was willing to put himself into a possibly dangerous situation to get our dog back. Unfortunately, the chase took Miguel longer than he'd have liked. In following the sedan and rescuing Zeus, he missed his engineering test. This, he knew, meant he'd failed the class. His dreams were dead. But the Maramonideses dulled the sting a little when they asked whether Miguel wanted to receive the $3,500 reward via cash or check. He had no idea what they were talking about. He hadn't done it for money, he just wanted to save Zeus. Still, the Miramenidezes insisted. While Miguel was worried that he wouldn't get his engineering license, the extra cash came at a perfect time before the holidays. "I have 2 kids," Miguel said. "I'm gonna do some Christmas shopping for them and put the rest in their savings accounts." But best of all, his professor had a little surprise for him too. After hearing what Miguel had done, the electrician teacher was impressed by Miguel's courage and good heart, so he agreed to let him take the test he had missed. Miguel risked his safety and his exam grade to save the dog of a stranger and reunite a family, a good deed some people would not have even considered. The Miramonides family will definitely keep a closer watch on Zeus from now on, but they'll keep taking him out for some surf sessions. Even though Zeus's kidnapping was extremely emotional for everyone involved, the fact Miguel was able to make such a selfless sacrifice to bring the family back together is what restores faith. And for one North Carolina family, faith was something they needed desperately. As the holidays were approaching, the Miller family needed to figure out what they were going to do for Christmas. The decision, this year, would be tough. Their home in North Carolina had been destroyed. When Hurricane Florence battered the East Coast in 2017, the Millers' home succumbed to the swift waters and raging wind. Their house was left unlivable, but they were determined to rebuild. Riddled with hard times, Jacob and Jamie Miller wanted a break from their chaotic life. Lucky for them, family and friends were willing to take them in, while their beloved German Shepherd puppy, Frank, stayed in South Carolina with Grandma. So, they boarded a plane and traveled to Salt Lake City, Utah, to spend Christmas with their extended family. Still, their 2 boys, Perrin and Raina, wished their furry friend could join the celebrations. Then, shortly after arriving in Utah and just days before Christmas, the oldest son, Perrin, complained of a persistent headache and intense pressure in his head. Concerned for their son, Jacob and Jamie rushed him to the hospital. Upon arrival, doctors immediately examined Perrin to determine what was wrong. Facing test after test, all 8-year-old Perrin could think about was his puppy back home. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, doctors were able to pinpoint the cause of Perrin's pain. Nothing could have prepared the Millers for what the doctors were about to tell them. Perrin, doctors said, had a tumor growing on his brain. He was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma multiforme, an aggressive, deadly form of cancer, especially in children. Nothing breaks a parent's heart faster than hearing the words aggressive, deadly, and cancer in relation to their child. But just like every other devastation the Millers had gone through, they weren't going down without a fight. One last kiss from his parents, and Perrin was rushed into emergency surgery. In an effort to comfort him, Jacob and Jamie promised Frank could visit him once he was out of surgery. After several hours, and with much relief, the surgery was completed. Doctors successfully removed the tumor from Perrin's brain. A victory in the young boy's fight, sure, but there were still mountains to climb in his recovery. A surgery of that magnitude involves significant recovery time, followed by a rigorous course of chemotherapy or radiation treatments to ensure 0 cancerous cells remain in the body. This meant that the Millers were staying in Utah indefinitely. Even there, however, they were willing to do whatever it took to help their little boy, even if that meant taking an unpaid extended leave from work and staying put with just a weekend bag. Still, something was missing from their home away from home. Their German Shepherd, Frank, was stuck in North Carolina. He was only 8 months old at the time, and Grandma just couldn't handle him on her own. And Perrin desperately wanted to be with him. With the help of Grandma, they looked into the cost of transporting Frank from North Carolina to Utah, but the $3,600 fee, on top of medical bills and relocation costs, was overwhelming. Grandma had one last idea though. Their community was so generous when they helped the Millers get back on their feet after Hurricane Florence. Would it be too much to ask for their help once more? She posted a Facebook plea requesting if anyone had ideas on how to transport Frank approximately 2,300 miles back to Perrin and his family. Unexpectedly, the post spread across social media like wildfire. News of the family's story reached Wisconsin, where it landed on the screen of Rob and Jennifer Reynolds. Touched by the story, Jennifer shared the heartbreaking post with her husband, a former truck driver. With little hesitation, Rob knew he needed to volunteer his time and help reunite this deserving family with their beloved dog. He felt that Frank could help Perrin recover. Rising before the sun, Rob packed up his Subaru Outback at 4:30 a.m. and embarked on the nearly 20-hour trip from his home in Ladysmith, Wisconsin, to North Carolina. This was just the beginning of the long trip ahead of him. By the morning of January 3rd, Rob had reached North Carolina to pick up the energetic pup. The next leg of the trip was going to be long and tiring, but Rob hoped that Frank would help him get through it. Since the story had already spread across the internet, Rob posted updates on Facebook in regards to their 2,300-mile cross-country trip. As it turns out, Frank was an amazing travel companion. "Frank and I got along very well," Rob said. "He would sleep or play with his toys. We'd stop and go for walks. If he wanted to use the bathroom, he'd bump my right arm. He was perfect." The trip was going so well that Rob even offered to drive Frank back to North Carolina in the future if need be. But after 52 hours of driving, Rob hoped that wouldn't be the case. On January 5, 2019, Rob and Frank arrived in Salt Lake City. No one was waiting outside the snowy home, but Frank sensed his family was nearby. The pooch ran right to the front door of the home. 72 hours after leaving North Carolina, Rob rang the doorbell in anticipation, unsure what state the family would be in on the other side. As the front door swung open, Rob knew the drive was totally worth it. Frank and the Millers went crazy at the sight of each other. For the first time in what seemed like forever, Perrin's face lit up with excitement. The boy explained, "I felt really excited to see Frank. I just really like Frank, and he's a good dog. Forever indebted to this kind stranger." Jacob explained, "It's been a whirlwind. It's been hard, but it's been overwhelmingly awesome at the same time. After everything the family had been through, it was a blessing to have Frank back in their arms. The only thing left for the Millers to do was keep on fighting." A sentiment that hits very close to home for one British soldier as he tried to reunite with his very own Frank. After 2 tours in Afghanistan, Sean Laidlaw left, figured he could handle anything Syria threw at him. But when the British Army deployed Sean and his comrades in the Royal Engineers in 2018, he leaped into a rescue attempt that he never saw coming. Sean was an expert at defusing and removing bombs. The Syrian civil war had ravaged the country over the last several years, especially in the city of Raqqa. While many buildings crumbled around him, others still had undetonated explosives inside. Even when Sean wasn't on patrol, the army life was a grind. Exciting moments in the camp were few and far between, and troop morale suffered greatly. When Sean got a call to investigate a bombed-out school in February, he was almost grateful. As Sean patrolled the area, he couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. When he really focused, however, he thought he could hear a faint whimpering somewhere under the rubble. Sean followed the noise and started digging. It was a puppy. The canine, which appeared to be some kind of Asian shepherd mix, backed away from Sean as he reached out. Sean knew he had to do something to help the poor thing, but then a horrific sight made him recoil. A few other puppies surrounded the one Sean just found. Tragically, none of them had survived the collapse of the building. Now that the dog lost her family, Sean realized he couldn't just leave her in the wreckage alone. The pup still wouldn't go near any strangers, so Sean did the sensible thing. He pulled out some water and a couple bites of food, and that was enough to draw the reluctant animal out from her hiding place. Soon after, the orphaned canine let its guard down and allowed Sean to pick her up. There was an immediate bond. Sean decided to bring her back to base and introduce his new friend to all his squad mates. First, of course, she would need a name. Sean called her Barry, and she soon became a fixture in the Royal Engineers, barely ever leaving Sean's side. Once she got settled in, Barry accomplished quite a bit of good as well. The army interacted with a number of Syrian children, many of whom lost their homes and family members. Amid the chaos and destruction, having a friendly dog roam around made a big difference in their lives. Sean also believes that having Barry around gave him an escape from the stress and trauma of the military life. Whereas some of his comrades developed mental illness or PTSD, Sean at least had an outlet and companion. Incredibly grateful to have such a valuable friend, Sean said, "I feel like it may come across that I saved Barry's life, but I feel like she saved mine." They got so close that Sean could no longer imagine being apart from Barry. Barry became such a big member of the team that Sean decided to make it official and sewed together a custom bomb squad vest for Barry. Aside from being a big fashion statement, the vest kept her protected from danger. However, it turned out that her biggest threat was right around the corner. In autumn of 2018, Sean received word that his stint in Syria was almost over. He was going home, but only with one ticket. What would happen to Barry once he left? He didn't know if he would ever see his dog again, or even if she would still have a home at the army base. Sean's comrades celebrated the entire trip back to the United Kingdom, but Barry weighed heavily on his mind. Then, an idea popped into his head. He remembered hearing about a charity called War Paws that helped reconnect veterans with their military dogs. War Paws workers seemed confident they could help Sean, but there were no guarantees. They instructed him to go to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris to await the arrival of a military plane. He waited nervously, hoping Barry would be one of the passengers getting off. As the airline staff rolled out a dog crate, Sean recognized a familiar face peering through the door. Barry made it to Europe after all. Holding back tears of joy, Sean reached out to hand her a gift. He got Barry a new and improved vest. She took a look in the airport mirror to size up her new duds, and her new surroundings. The streets of Raqqa, Syria, were all Barry had ever known, so Sean hoped she would adjust to British life easily enough. With Barry back in his arms, Sean returned home to Hornchurch, Essex. She settled in immediately, a far cry from the scared puppy that wouldn't come out of the ruined school. Thanks to a stable home and steady diet, Barry grew like a weed too. A full-grown dog, Barry continued to live happily with Sean. After going through so much together, there's no doubt that this pair would never let anything split them apart ever again.